Well, welcome everyone to our session this morning on accessibility in Canvas. I'm Dave Giberson. I'm an old retired online learning pathways instructional design coordinator from years ago. I've been retired for about 3 years now, I can't believe. And they've asked me to come back and do a little consulting to help out during this unusual time here. First we were transitioning learning management systems from Blackboard to Canvas. I helped out with that, and now this. So it is a pleasure, however, to get to see a lot of old friends and make some new ones. So I will look forward to talking to you today. Indeed, I hope this will be more of a dialogue than a lecture. I hope you will have have questions and that you'll answer them. I'd like to keep the questions on topic, on the topic of accessibility for the first part, for the presentation part of the session, and then I will entertain just general questions at the end of the session and help out in any way I can. I'm going to be sharing my screen for most of the day, of course. So let me go ahead and do that. That's Zoom's unique capability, or critical capability, as a virtual classroom. And here is our outline for today. We're going to talk just a little bit about we're going to have a little bit of a general discussion about accessibility, why it's important, and who the beneficiaries of it are. Then we'll talk a little bit about how Canvas itself is accessible and how accessible it is to students with disabilities, to students with varying capabilities in areas of sensory issues, hearing impairment, visual impairment, and cognitive issues, people who are dyslexic or who process information better audibly than they do visually through text and so on. Then we'll talk about the content that you upload to Canvas. We'll talk a little bit about how to make that accessible. We can't do a tremendous amount about that. That's a topic worthy of several sessions in and of itself, but we'll touch on that. Then we'll deal with some major web content accessibility issues and look at specific examples of those and talk about some practical solutions to them. And then throughout the process, we'll be dealing with accessibility checker capabilities, ways that you can evaluate your documents, your Canvas pages for accessibility, including accessibility checkers in the Canvas Rich Content Editor in Microsoft Office. And we're going to look at a relatively new capability in Canvas, the Microsoft Immersive Reader, which applies to Canvas pages, which tend to constitute the bulk of your content in a Canvas course. And this gives you some really exciting new capabilities vis-a-vis accessibility for your content in Canvas. And it's fun, so we'll take a good look at it. This outline is available publicly. I'm going to put the link to it in the chat tool. I'll even try to spell it correctly. There we go. All right, I just put that in the chat tool for everyone. And remember, you can save that chat tool at any time. Or save the chat log, I should say. So let's start off here. Why do I care? What's important about accessibility? Well, obviously, we want all of our students to be able to benefit from the materials that we provide to them online through Canvas and through Zoom for that matter. The and this type of delivery format poses unique challenges for people with sensory difficulties, those who are deaf or hearing impaired, those who are blind or visually impaired, can have have quite a bit of difficulty uh, acquiring and processing information off the web like this, or in a Zoom session as we are right now. And we are morally and legally obligated to make sure that these students have a successful educational experience through these channels, through the channels of Zoom and of the web, access to information on the web through Canvas. Numerous federal and state laws and district policies mandate that. It's just not optional. We do have to realize that accessibility is a goal, not necessarily one that we will ever reach completely. There are degrees of accessibility. There are things that are easy to do, and there are things that are very difficult to do in the way of accessibility. And no delivery method, no document, no web page, no Zoom session is 100% accessible to every possible disability, but it is our job to make sure that we do the best we possibly can to make it so, or make it as close to that goal as we possibly can. And in order to meet the needs of these students. But it's not just our students with disabilities or cognitive difficulties that we're supporting here when we make our courses, our Canvas courses, or our Zoom sessions accessible. We benefit everyone. It's called the curb cut effect by accessibility professionals. Much of what we do to make our content, our web content, our Zoom sessions more accessible to students with disabilities also makes them easier and more to access and more usable for everyone. One of the first accessibility requirements in the physical world that was mandated by the Americans with Disabilities Act was to cut the curbs of sidewalks at corners in such a way that a person in a wheelchair could get up, could cross the street, and get down into the street and back up onto the sidewalk without having to have the chair lifted over a 6-inch curb. So towns all over the world, or all over the country, began making cuts in the curbs and providing ramps up onto the sidewalks and so on. And suddenly people realized that benefited everyone. The mothers with strollers were benefited. Cyclists were benefited. Kids on skateboards. It made it easier to get out of the street and up onto the sidewalk without stepping up over it for people with limited mobility. So it was a tremendous benefit to everyone. This value-added nature of accessibility has been a huge impact. It more than compensates for the time, effort, and money that was spent in creating those curb cuts and so many other accessibility modifications that we've had to make in the physical and in the virtual world, as we're speaking about today. So everyone benefits from these. Captions on video, almost all videos that are shown on broadcast TV now, or just about anywhere, have captions for the hearing impaired. Well, that's for whom they were originally intended. But the benefits of those have gone far beyond the world of the hearing impaired. The use of captions by the hearing impaired is only the third most common way that captions benefit people. Number one is two people sitting in bed at night, one of them watching TV and the other one trying to sleep. The person who's watching TV can turn the sound down and watch the captions. Seriously, they've done studies that indicate that is the number one scenario in which captions are consumed. The second most common is assistance for people whose primary language is not the primary language of the video. In this country, of course, people who are for whom English is a second language. We generally read a new language effectively long before we speak it or listen to it effectively. And the captions are a great benefit to people for whom the whatever the language of the dialogue is not their primary language. I've been put especially in mind of that recently. My wife has been binge watching Outlander. And for those of you not familiar with the series, it takes place in Scotland. And those folks are speaking English, but you have a hard time discerning that at times. Without the captions, she wouldn't be able to watch the show because you'd only catch about every other word. So these are well, not necessarily unintended benefits, but value-added benefits of accessibility enhancements, making the world better for everyone. So it's important that we do this, not just for our students, but for the relatively small number of students for whom disabilities are an issue, but for everyone. So what about Canvas itself? Is the Canvas interface, the Canvas tools, all of that accessible? And I'll go back again and say that nothing is completely accessible. But Canvas gets quite a good bill of health from the various standards organizations that evaluate and promulgate accessibility standards and regulations. Canvas or Instructure, the company, has taken accessibility quite seriously. And the Canvas interface is designed technically in a way that it is much more than average, much better than average in its accessibility to persons with, particularly with hearing impairment and visual impairment. Given that the web is an inherently visual medium, that is a real challenge. And yet Canvas does a pretty good job. They're rated by most of these agencies as being substantially conforming to accessibility regulations, basically meaning they're not perfect, but they do expend a lot of effort on this. And Canvas is one of the better learning management systems in that regard. The one that we used to have, Blackboard, was also quite good in that regard, and one that has won many awards for that particular effort. Canvas, Instructure through Canvas, has also done an excellent job. So we have we're fortunate enough to have a platform to upon which we can put our content that is reasonably more than reasonably accessible to our students with disabilities. And here we are in Canvas. Let me get some things organized here briefly. All right. So that's a good thing because there's not much we could do about that ourselves. That came into play during the evaluation process when the California community colleges were trying to decide on a universal learning management system for the entire CCC system. And Canvas scored very well in that regard, in that competition. So that's good to know. What we do have control over, of course, is to ensure that the content that we load into Canvas is itself accessible, because Canvas can't do anything about that. If you upload a document to Canvas that's inherently inaccessible in and of itself, or a video or whatever, there's nothing that Canvas can do to help with that. So this becomes our responsibility. And it's a many featured thing. This is an immense issue, and not something that will ever be completely perfect at. I have to understand that accessibility is not a binary condition. That is, you're either a document or a system is either accessible or not accessible. It's a continuum, and we want to be as far on the accessible end of that continuum as we possibly can be. And fortunately, there are useful tools and simple things that we can do to make sure that the content that we provide to our students is as accessible as we can possibly make it. There are, as I say, this is a subject that we could spend hours and hours on all by itself, but let's just take a look at a few simple things that you're likely to have access to, and that can be of very great help in correcting a lot of simple accessibility problems that are not difficult to alleviate. Let's start with Microsoft Office. We'll use Microsoft Word as an example here. Let me just bring up a Word document. Oh, let's see. Here's a fairly simple Word document with some basic elements, a picture, text, and a table. Tables are especially important when you're talking about accessibility issues. So let's take a look at this. Well, how can we ensure that things like Word documents or Excel spreadsheets or PowerPoint presentations are accessible to our students with disabilities when we put them on Canvas, say, and share them with them? Well, Word and indeed all Microsoft Office applications have an accessibility checker built in. And we'll go to, you can find that in the review link in the application menu here at the top. And it's right here, check accessibility. In the review ribbon, just a little ways in from the left. If I click that, I got a pop-up panel on the right side here. Let me move this out of the way of any video windows or whatever that might be over there. I know this part of the Zoom screen. By the way, if you're lecturing in Zoom, you want to keep in mind that some people, depending on the devices that they're using to access your meeting, may have things like little video windows of themselves over here in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, or other things that are occluding the far right-hand edge of the screen. So it's better to keep content that you're sharing away from that part of the screen. So I'm going to, let me get this out of the way so that it's, less distracting. So now you can see that I'm not using this, particularly this upper right-hand corner of the screen, so that I'd be fairly confident that people can see what I'm showing them when I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so here's our accessibility checker. And what it does is identify common accessibility issues with documents in Microsoft Office. This is not the most sophisticated or the most complete accessibility checker around by a long shot. There are those that are much more sophisticated. There's one put out by Blackboard, as a matter of fact, called Ally, that we've always wanted to provide to everybody at the district, but it's extremely expensive. So for right now, we're going to have to get away with what comes with Microsoft Office in this regard, at least in terms of Office documents. And this, in this document, it's identified two possible accessibility issues for us, and both of which are, well, one of which is very easy to fix, the other of which is a little bit more of a challenge. So let's take the easy one first. It's telling me missing alternative text. What does it mean by that? Well, I can find out what it means by clicking this little down caret. And it says it's picture 1. Well, where's picture 1? Well, if I click on that, it highlights it for me. Well, I could have figured that out. That's the only picture in there. But if there were multiple pictures, it will identify where the problem is. And it's saying missing alternative text. What's it mean by that? Well, this is a problem for the visually impaired. A blind student or one with extremely low vision will often use a piece of software called a screen reader for documents and web pages that contain a lot of text. And the screen reader converts the text in the document to audible speech and reads it to the student, which of course is a huge help. This is also valuable to folks who do not process text well. There's a whole, in the continuum of learning strengths and disabilities, there's a whole group of people who just don't read well. People with various reading disorders like dyslexia and so on have a difficult time processing information, processing text or information from text. And they do much better when it's read to them. Well, the screen reader will read it to them. But an obvious issue with that sort of process is that pictures can't be read. And a student who's blind, for a student who's blind, the picture is worthless. So what we can do to help alleviate that problem is provide what's called alternate or alt text for any picture, any image that we put into a document or into a Canvas page or whatever. And it's just simple descriptive text that informs the screen reader and the blind student or whomever what that picture is. If I click down the menu button here at the right of this interface, it gives me some ways that I can alleviate this problem. And the two are either add a description or mark an image as decorative. In other words, meaningless. So that it doesn't, if an image is simply there to make the page prettier, but doesn't convey any information, well, the screen reader will just ignore it like it's not there. But in this case, this image has meaning. It's our Online Learning Pathways logo. So I can add a description to it there by just typing it in. So that provides pretty much all the information to a blind student that a sighted student would get if they looked at the image, maybe even a little more. And let's see, there's no save button there, so apparently that's just been done. So now that issue disappears from the list here. The other issue is with this table here, the word table. Tables present unique problems to screen readers because the blind student can't just take a look at that table as a whole and digest the organization of the information in the table. The screen reader can just read it to the student one cell at a time. So it's critical that the order in which the table cells are going to be read by the screen reader is logical. And we can check that by clicking this down caret here and going to our table. I only have one table here. If there were multiple tables, it would list them all for me. And I can check that. Actually, the easiest way probably to check reading order in a table is simply to go to the upper left-hand corner of the table, the upper leftmost cell, and start hitting the tab key. And that will tell you the order in which the screen reader is going to go through the table. So this one's going to go across each row, and then down a row, and then across the next one, and so on, as opposed to going down the columns and then coming back up to the top. And that's what you want in this case, in order to make this table somewhat accessible to a blind student. It's still not great, but it's somewhat accessible. So that tells us that the reading order is about the best we can do. Also, the simpler the organization of the table, the better. And we can check table styles here and pick just a really basic one like that and click on it. And boom. Now, at least the word accessibility checker is happy with this document. Again, it doesn't mean the document is perfectly accessible. This accessibility checker is relatively rudimentary, but you have fixed very easily and quickly some issues that, as easy as it was for you to correct those issues, they could have been major hurdles for a blind student, depending on a screen reader. Speaking of accessibility and tables, as I say, tables in a document, in a Word document especially, do present unique challenges to screen reader software. So another possibility is to just avoid presenting information in tables where possible. Sometimes, obviously, it's not possible to do that. But at other times, there may be other ways you can think of to present the same information without using a table. In web pages, for instance, tables are often used to control the exact placement of images or blocks of text on a web page, because the web hypertext markup language doesn't allow the precise placement of things like images and so on that you have in Microsoft Word. And that can cause problems, accessibility problems. So one of the things that can be done is just to avoid, where possible, accept less control over the appearance of the page for everyone in order to minimize the difficulties that you see with tables in web pages. Indeed, Canvas is about to overhaul their editor, their content editor, where it's used when in the creation of Canvas pages. And we'll spend quite a bit of time looking at that this morning, as it is now. But they're about to remove the option to even create tables in the Canvas rich content editor. So staying away from tables where possible is another positive accessibility behavior for content creators like us. So that accessibility checker is always there, always available to you in uh, Microsoft Word or any other Office application.
Dave?
Yes, good time
Is
for a question.
is there a way just to enlarge all the print for someone who, or do they have their own way of doing that?
There is a magnifier tool built into Windows and to the Mac OS that will allow a student who needs it to magnify the screen at any time. In Windows, it's just, if I go down here and search for it, it's a good question. There's the, just type the first few letters, there's the magnifier.
Okay, so, but we don't need to do anything special to make that
You
accessible.
don't have to do anything special to make that possible. That's right. And I can't really demonstrate that to you effectively right now. But yes, that capability is always there. On the other hand, avoiding the use of excessively small fonts and things like that is also a good practice, because the classic issue of fine print, you only use that if you don't want people to get information from it, right? So there are things you can do in that regard. Bolding where necessary and things like that, avoiding the display of information in keyed to color and so on, are things that you can do. We'll talk more about that as we go on. Okay, doesn't seem like my version of Office has this checker. I'm not sure when that was introduced. I'm using Office 2016 here, which is like the Office 365, and current versions of Office do have this, but I don't know how far back this went now that you mention it. Okay, so let's a reasonable look at that. Another common document format that is used in Canvas and many other places is, of course, the PDF document format, Adobe Acrobat Reader documents. And we don't have time for a comprehensive look at accessibility issues in PDFs, but you can go to the Adobe website. Actually, what I did here was just a search for PDF accessibility. Should have shown you that. And here's a number of links to issues involving accessibility of PDF documents. And you can get all sorts of information about that. It's worth a quick look if you do use PDFs extensively. Again, we don't really have time to go into this in great detail, but there is one overriding thing to consider about PDF documents in terms of accessibility, and that's the origin of the PDF document. PDFs can be created basically in two ways. They can either be created by scanning a paper document, which produces a picture of the document. And then that is encoded in PDF format and can be displayed in the Acrobat Reader that almost everybody has on their computers. It's free for everyone. And that works, but that has some really serious accessibility limitations because it is just a picture. There's no sort of underlying information encoded into that. It's just an image, and it can't be handled by screen readers at all. Thankfully, most PDF documents are created in some other application first, like Word. and then exported from that application as a PDF. You can just save a Word document as a PDF, as a portable document format document, right out of Word. When you do that, of course, it becomes more universally displayable to people. A PDF is famously a cross-platform document format. Anybody on any kind of computing device can display a PDF document, as long as they have the reader software loaded, which almost everyone does. Can't get your tax forms otherwise, right? So this is a much more common circumstance, thankfully. And PDF documents which are created in this way are inherently much more accessible, because a great deal of information about the document is encoded into the PDF file, including the actual text of the document, and all that is there, and can be accessed by screen readers. So that a PDF document that's been created from a Word document can be read to the student through a screen reader, whereas with the one that was just produced by scanning, cannot. So that's probably the one critical thing I'll mention about PDFs, that if you're going to use PDFs in your course, make sure they're not just scans of paper documents. And know something about their provenance, in other words. Okay, I don't need that. Go back to here. So that's just some basic information that you might find useful in that regard. Now we're going to talk about some, well, let me bring that back, some major accessibility issues on the web with web content, some of which we've dealt with a little bit already, and we'll go into a little more detail, and others that we'll introduce from scratch. And I'm going to look at these accessibility issues through the lens of a content type called the Canvas page. So let's go to Canvas and look at that. See if I can figure out what I did with Canvas here. Okay, I've got a Canvas shell that I've built to use for these courses. So let me go into that. It's just got a little bit of content in it. And again, we're going to be looking primarily here in this section of the presentation at so-called Canvas pages, because these are things that you have control over. We've already talked about the documents that the files that you might upload in Canvas. And that's one major content type in Canvas. The other major way to display information for your students to read and view in Canvas is the Canvas page, which is basically a web page that you create within Canvas, or maybe that you brought over from your old Blackboard course. Blackboard items in Blackboard were converted into Canvas pages when they were brought over. So much of your content in your Blackboard course was probably in the form of Blackboard items, and those were brought over as Canvas pages. So a typical Canvas course consists of dozens of Canvas pages, and often the bulk of the information that is delivered to the student in a Canvas course is delivered through Canvas pages. So it's critical that these be as accessible as we can possibly make them. I've got a little sample page here that I've created to illustrate some major accessibility issues or considerations in Canvas pages. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. First thing we'll talk about is so-called link text, a very common element in any web page, of which a Canvas page is just a specific type of example. But a major part of any web page is generally links to content outside of that page, so-called hypertext. That's the fundamental characteristic of the World Wide Web. The ability to link from page to page to page, creating a web of information is where the term came from. And I've shown two samples here of ways to insert hyperlinks or links to content outside of this page into the page. The first one is a very bad way to do it, and the second one is a preferable way, or a relatively preferable way. We'll often do something from the very beginning of the World Wide Web. It was common to do something like this, to say, click here to access the CNN website, and just make the word here a hyperlink. We do that by highlighting the text here. Well, of course, I need to be in edit mode to do this, sorry. We highlight that text, we click the link to URL or the hyperlink button, and you can do this exactly the same sort of thing in Word and in just about any other content editor that you're ever going to find. And then we type in or paste in the URL, the Uniform Resource Locator, or the web address for that page. It starts HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, a : 2 forward slashes, and then some text separated by periods. And that's what makes that a hyperlink. But one of the characteristics of a screen reader is that when it reads the page, it reads a web page, is that it identifies the hyperlinks on the page first, because that's some of the most critical content on the page. It shows the blind student how to get from that page to other content that they might need to access. And it does so sometimes out of context. It will just read the hyperlink, a list of the hyperlinks on the page before going ahead and reading the text and so on. So it's critical for a blind student using a screen reader that the link text, the anchor for the hyperlink, which in this case is just the word here, means something. And that doesn't mean anything if it's out of context. Click here. If the screen reader just reads that as here and then goes on, that doesn't tell the blind student anything. So this is a very poor choice of ways to put a hyperlink into a document, into a web page. What you want is something more like the second option, where it says, click on the following link to access the CNN website, and the hyperlink covers access the whole phrase, access the CNN website. So if that is read out of context, it's clear what that's going to do, where it's not if the word here by itself is used. So this is a simple bit of Canvas page design that you can keep in the back of your mind when you are creating links in the Canvas Rich Content Editor, either to content inside of or outside of Canvas or inside of Canvas. This obviously is a link accessing content, external content out on the World Wide Web. But you can just as easily in the Rich Content Editor in Canvas access content inside of Canvas. Maybe you want to provide a link on this page to, say, the modules in the Canvas page. You could say, click here to access your modules. And highlight this and not be doing it well. Or you can say, click this link to, and then make access your modules the link anchor, the link text. And then click on that. I'm sorry, excuse me, living in the past. Then you go to, in the rich content editor, to the links tab over here on the right. And there are all sorts of things inside of Canvas that you can link to from within a Canvas page. So again, you can be providing information to your student, and then you can give them a link to go somewhere in Canvas to apply that information. And in this case, we might select course navigation and go to the modules. Now that's a link to the modules within the Canvas course. And again, this link will be, when it's read by a screen reader, will be much more informative to the blind student than just the word here would be. Okie dokie. So that pretty much covers that concept. The next concept I want to deal with is alternate text for images. We've touched on that already. Let's look at it in a little bit more detail. I've got several images here in this document. Let's talk about alternate text issues with these. Well, this first picture is just a pretty picture. If this were a biology course, now we're talking about flowers, then there would be some information inherent in this. But in this case, it's just a pretty picture, something I put up there to make the page more visually appealing. Well, but that's neither here nor there for a screen reader. So how do you make a screen reader just ignore a picture if there is no information embedded, as it were, in that picture in this context? Well, you can highlight the picture in an already created page like this, and go to the tool that was used to embed the picture in the Canvas page to start with, the Embed Image tool here. And let's go to the Canvas tab, since that's I uploaded this picture through Canvas. And here I have a box for alt text. That you'll be presented with this alt text box at the time you embed the image in Canvas, in the Canvas page to start with. So this is not something you have to go back and do later. You can take care of this. Indeed, the ideal way to proceed is to add the alt text to a picture when you first put it into Canvas. But this image really doesn't have any informational content in this context. So I can tell the screen reader that this is just a decorative image, and the screen reader will just ignore it. So let me get this out of the way. I can now update that image, and that image now has alternate text associated with it. Probably should have started this discussion by showing you the accessibility checker that is built into the Canvas Rich Content Editor. And it's this icon right here, Galileo's Circle of Man, famous diagram. And this will allow, and this is often associated with accessibility, that image is. So if we click on that, we get an accessibility checker pop up. And if I had started this off the way I should have, let me go back and take that alt text out of that one. Oh, got the wrong one selected. Or take off that decorative image link update. Now, if I run the accessibility checker, I've got 4 issues in this course. The first one highlights this picture and says there's no alt text for this. and we get the option to either add alt text or designate it as a decorative image and apply that. So now it takes, okay, that dealt with that issue. So now it takes me to the next issue. Apparently, I did put alternate text. Let me just pop out of this for a second. I did put alternate text on this one. I can check that by going to the Embed Image tool, go to Canvas. Yes, I did. I designated that as the Online Learning Pathways logo. So I did that correctly when I first put that into the page. What are the odds of that? But now if I go back to the accessibility checker, it highlights the next image and it says, well, that doesn't have alt text either. But this image is a little bit more of a challenge. Let me pull the accessibility checker off. This is a graph. There's an awful lot of information embedded, encoded into that graph. And what am I going to do for my blind student in that regard? Well, this obviously requires quite a lot more information for the blind student. Indeed, this is going to be a challenge. Alternate text is recommended to be no more than about a sentence or two long. But this one's probably going to require more than that. And here was my best effort at this. If I go, let me run the accessibility checker again, let it flag that image, and it gives me an option to add alt text. So that's a way to do this rather than going back to the Embed Image tool and adding it there, but either one will work. Well, let's see. Here was my best effort at that. Copying this from off screen. So you don't want to watch me type this much text. This is a little extreme for alt text, but it will work. The screen reader will read this to the blind student in most cases anyway. That's a lot of alternate text. I can finally get all the way over to the left of it so I can read it to you. This is a graph showing the upper right quadrant of a Cartesian coordinate system. The vertical y-axis represents distance traveled and is graduated in kilometers in increments of 50, starting, and you get the idea. And I go through and I describe visually or verbally this image and try to draw a word picture for the blind student. Obviously, this is going to be much more effective for a student who was not born blind, but at least it's an effort. I can't not display information in graphs in many fields. So it's essential that I try to describe those graphs as completely as possible in the alt text for the images of them. But there's obviously a limit to how much I can do in that regard. So at least in this case, if I apply that text, that takes out, yeah, alt text should not contain more than 120 characters. Well, that's a goal, but I'm not sure how I could describe this in less, so I'm going to leave it alone and go on to the next issue. Here's another common problem with information. Now I'm going to have to get out of the accessibility checker to see this. People with, hello? Let me take care of that just a second. Okay, there we go. People with visual impairment often have a very hard time with low contrast display situations where the contrast between the information and its background is the difference is very low, very small. That text is, as it says, is hard to read because I picked a poor color and a poor color for the, or poor color combination for the text color and the background color. And avoiding that situation is particularly important for students with visual impairment. And that's very obviously very simple to avoid simply by choosing text color and background colors appropriately. This is going to be a lot easier to read if I make the text color black, and a dark black at that. I can also change the background to highlight, though it's hard to get more contrast than between flat white and solid black. So you want to avoid circumstances where you, in the interests of aesthetics, you get yourself into situations where you have limited contrast display. You can avoid that circumstance, as we've seen here. Most web browsers also have high contrast, and indeed operating systems have high contrast display settings that students with visual difficulties can enable themselves, thereby increasing all contrast throughout either everything displayed on the computer screen, or in the case of a web browser, all web pages displayed within that web browser can have heightened contrast. And that, of course, is something that your student will probably be familiar with, and you won't have to worry about. Though it's something you can point out to them in case they don't know it. Another issue that we often run into, accessibility issue that we often run into on the web, is display of information through color. That's a very effective way, very visually effective way of providing keys to information displayed on a web page. Classic example might be you're filling out a form online to buy something, and you're putting in your credit card information and so on, and you forget to put something in. And when you try to submit the page will flash back up with you, and it will highlight what you missed or what you neglected to complete in red. And red is a warning sign. We're trained from birth to interpret red as a warning sign, so we tend to notice it when it shows up, and it brings the issue to our attention very quickly, and that's great. Except in cases where you're one of the, what is it? I forget what the prevalence is, maybe 15% of people who are red-green colorblind, for whom red is just a muddy brown. It doesn't help them. So if we're dedicated to making our web pages, our Canvas pages, as accessible as possible to all students, we want to avoid, wherever we can, conveying information through color. I've got a specific example of that here. Let me pull that up for you. I gotta find it. Where did I put that? There it is. Here's a simple Excel spreadsheet, and I've made a graph of these two series of numbers against one another. And I'm identifying, by default, Excel identifies the different data ranges by different colors so that they stand out. And you can immediately tell that the orange bar here indicates profit, and the blue bars indicate expenses. That's a useful way to convey information, but again, for people, and there are lots of forms of color blindness other than just red-green color blindness. So displaying information as color is always a bit risky. So what can we do here? Well, in this case, in Excel anyway, we have an option to distinguish the data series here visually in ways other than color. We can just click on one of those bars to activate that data series, and right-click and select Format Data Series. And this is not an Excel tutorial, but just meant to be an illustration of how you, in at least one circumstance, how you can avoid conveying information by color. And in our Format Data Series panel that pops up here, there's a fill and line option. And instead of solid fill or automatic, which would produce the same result, I can select pattern fill here. And that gives me just a host of different kinds of patterns that I can use to designate that. So in addition to the color now, I have a texture that distinguishes this bar from this one. And of course, I can go to this data series and I can do the same thing. And I can choose a different texture. We'll go to pattern fill. And let's pick something that's really different from that. All right, now even somebody who's colorblind can immediately see the difference between those two data series. So one way in one context to avoid displaying information by color. Alrighty, let's run our accessibility checker again, see where we are. Well, I'm going to leave that alt text the way it is. Now, the only other issue we have left is the table. And as I said before, there are lots of accessibility issues with tables. And where you can avoid tables, you should. But if you just can't avoid them, one thing you can do is add a caption to the table, which informs the screen reader and thus the blind student the type of information that the table is conveying, so that they have some context when the screen reader starts reading the table to them across across each row. They have a concept of what is in that table to start with. So this accessibility checker in the Canvas content editor gives you a very easy way to add a caption. And this is this was training seminar schedule. And I can apply that caption. And now I'm down to just one issue, which I've decided to live with. So I can eliminate that. So now that caption appears in a just above the table and makes it easier for the blind student to digest the information when you're done. So that's something else you can do with the table, is provide a caption. Okay. Well, we're making good progress here. 10:13. Any questions that you'd like to ask right now? Hearing none. Let's see how we're doing. Moving on, we'll talk now about media accessibility, specifically audio files and video. Those both of those have obvious implications for hearing impaired students, but for others as well. Students for whom the spoken word is spoken in a language that's not their primary language, for instance. Or again, people who just have trouble reading, or I'm sorry, trouble processing information auditorially. Just as there are people who have difficulty reading, there are people who have difficulty listening or processing information from an audible source. And they really need to be able to read it in addition to being able to hear it. In the case of an audio file, the obvious solution is to provide a transcript for the audio so that the student can read it instead of listening to it, or read it while listening to it, which is really helpful for English as a second language students, say. If they can read it and hear it at the same time, not only does it make it easier for them to process the information in the audio sample that you're providing them, but also gives them extra practice in listening to English speech with an immediate textual equivalent. So it's great pedagogy to do that, to provide a transcript of an audio file, and it's required by accessibility regulations as well. Question then becomes, how can we produce the transcript? Well, there are numerous software packages that will take an audio file and convert it to text, and do speech to text. Most of those are not free. Dragon Naturally Speaking is probably the most common one, though it mainly does text to speech to text. What am I saying? Text to speech, but it can do the other as well. The probably the best solution I've run across, though, for producing transcripts is something that's also valuable in the case of providing captions for videos. Obviously, a video with a soundtrack is not accessible to students with hearing impairment or students with cognitive issues like not being native speakers of the language, or other cognitive issues that make it more difficult for them to process information auditorially. A video with a soundtrack or an audio with an audio file is not accessible to these folks, not fully accessible anyway. So how do we alleviate that? Obviously by, as I've already said, producing a transcript for the audio selection, or by providing captions for the video, synchronized text that pops up on the screen when the person is saying something and provides the content of the speech as text. We've all seen captions on videos. Those are essential in order for these media types to be accessible to students with hearing impairments and other students as well. So the question becomes, how do we provide those transcripts, those captions? And we have a couple of wonderful tools that will be of great use to us in that regard. The one I'm going to spend most of my time talking about here is YouTube. We tend to disparage YouTube as an instructional tool sometimes because of all the cat videos and influencer videos talking about applying makeup and things like that. Yes, there's an awful lot of frivolous content on YouTube, but it's not all videos of cats riding robot vacuum cleaners around the room. There's a tremendous amount of valid and very useful instructional content on YouTube. Anybody who's ever tried to fix their lawnmower, for example, themselves has probably gone to YouTube to find out how to do that. And academically, instructional material is rampant on YouTube as well, from institutions as prestigious as Berkeley or MIT. So it's critical that this content be accessible to people with disabilities. And YouTube, a number of years ago, took this problem in hand and began providing automatic captioning for all of their videos. And initially, that automatic captioning was quite inaccurate in many cases, and more a joke than anything else at first. But they persisted with it, and they've gotten to the point where it's phenomenally accurate these days. So let's take a look at how that works in YouTube. And this will also have implications for us for just purely audio content as well. We'll see how that works. So let's pull up YouTube. And I'm going to go, rather than this distraction, I'm going to go to my account on YouTube, to my YouTube video list. We'll pick something out of there to play with, and show you how to do that as well in the process. Here's a little tutorial I made just yesterday. So let's take a look at it. Students can see their grades and get feedback thereupon. Okay, well, it's fine. There's sound, but there are also closed captions. As long as you see this little symbol in the player bar down here, and obviously hearing impaired students will be familiar with that symbol. That's the universal symbol for closed captions. Closed captions just being captions that can be turned on and off, as opposed to open captions, which are always on and can't be turned off. They're actually burned into the video. Either one meets the requirements under Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, part of ADA that governs this. And this symbol is universally used to distinguish that. So now, in the Grades tool, in the course menu in Canvas, individual gradable items, homework assignments, quizzes, graded discussions will appear here. The captions are generally almost perfect in YouTube. So one way you can ensure that videos that you use in Canvas are accessible to people with hearing impairments is to put the video on YouTube. Don't upload it directly to Canvas. This is just one of the reasons for not uploading your videos directly to Canvas. Because if you do, unless the video is captioned, unless it has open captions burned into it, which is relatively unlikely, it's not going to be accessible to students with hearing impairments, and it is not permissible to use that video for instructional purposes by district policy, state law, and a number of federal laws. So it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. So definitely don't ever want to have a video displayed anywhere in Canvas that is not captioned. But there's no need to, because YouTube will take care of that for you. This used to be a lot more of a problem than it is today. The other reasons you don't upload video to Canvas, the other major reason is that you only have a limited amount of file space in your Canvas course. It's set right now by default to be a gigabyte. A long video can be hundreds of megabytes in size. So you can use up your file space in Canvas quite rapidly by uploading videos to it. Not only that, Canvas is just not designed as a video server, so it can only handle a certain amount of that content at any given time. And if we get too much video content actually loaded on the Canvas, we get a nastygram from instructor saying, you know, you're not abiding by your contract obligations to keep video or media traffic to a certain minimum level. We just can't handle this. You know, we're providing this learning management system. It's not designed as a video server. While it will do a certain amount of that, it can't handle an infinite amount of that kind of content. So the solution is to put your videos somewhere other than Canvas. Probably the best solution is YouTube, because it's free, it's extremely functional, and it's more compatible with more endpoint player devices than anything else in the world. So it's just a terrific resource. And Google, who has lots of money, can pay for the online storage and the bandwidth necessary to deliver these videos to your students. Such a deal. All right, so this is quite well captioned. But let's say you just wanted a transcript, and captions are required, let me say that, for a video, not transcripts, because transcripts do not, just a simple text transcript doesn't provide the synchronization with the events in the video that are necessary to actually make use of the video. If you didn't know when somebody was saying graded discussions will appear here in the video, it wouldn't do you any good. So with videos, you've got to have embedded captions. But for audio files, obviously just transcripts will do. And you can, in fact, get a transcript for any captioned YouTube video by going to the video page in YouTube and going down here to this little line of icons just below and to the right of the video, and clicking on this little additional menu button here, the ellipsis. That symbol gets used a lot for, and so forth, extra information. You click on that and you have the option to open a transcript. And there's the transcript of this video. Bing. Again, not perfect, but there are very few errors of word recognition in here. The main lack in this transcript and in the captions is the placement of capital letters at the beginning of each sentence and punctuation marks throughout, including periods at the end of sentences, which help with interpreting the captions, but are not essential. So you can always get this transcript as well. You can, in fact, also, let's see, oh, and you can, of course, acquire this transcript if you need it by just highlighting it, copying it to your clipboard, and then pasting it into a text editor like Word or Notepad or whatever. So you can always acquire a transcript if you need it this way for a video. We'll talk more about how we can hack this vis-a-vis audio files in a minute. Okay, so we've got questions, or we've got captions, we've got the transcript here, but they're not perfect, and there may be some editing of these captions required. In this case, really probably not. I went through this, and the word recognition is almost perfect, and any minor errors were not materially did not materially affect the understandability of the captions. The way to evaluate this, of course, is to turn your speakers all the way down and watch the video, and use the captions yourself, and see if you can figure out what's going on, if you can discern what's going on in the video with the captions solely without the sound. And if you can, then they're fine. But there may be instances where some words, especially jargon terms, are not identified correctly. Though YouTube's gotten so much better about that and recognizes so many jargon, technical terms, and so on that it didn't used to. But there still may be times when this needs to be edited. And that's quite easily done in YouTube. This assumes, of course, that you are the owner of the video. If you're not the owner of the video, you can't edit the captions. There are ways that you can produce edited captions for a video that you don't own on YouTube, but they're quite frankly excessively tedious to use. A tool called Amara comes to mind. But the best solution in a case like that would, if it's not your video, would be to just find a different video that has better captions, that covers the same subject material, and chances are you can find that on YouTube. If you were to run into a video on YouTube that you absolutely just felt you had to use because it was just the most perfect thing you'd ever seen for that particular bit of knowledge in your subject area, there are ways to produce accurate transcripts of YouTube videos that you don't own, and we would be happy to help you with that. But that's not something I'm going to recommend on a general basis. But if we are the owner of the video, we can easily edit the captions by going to, just by pulling the video up in YouTube. You have to be logged into your Google account while you're doing this. If you don't have a Google account, you can get one for free. If you have a Google account of any kind, if you use Gmail or Google Docs, Google Drive, you already have a Google account, and that translates to being a YouTube account as well, because YouTube is owned by Google. So you have a YouTube account if you have any kind of Google account, and you can just log into YouTube as you would any of your other Google resources and access your videos. Of course, you wouldn't have videos up there if you didn't have a Google account. So if I click on that Edit Video button there to the lower right hand of the excuse me, of the video window, I get lots of information about the video, but I also get an option to deal with the subtitles. The words captions and subtitles are usually used more or less interchangeably. There is a technical distinction. There are several technical distinctions between the two, but for our purposes, we'll consider them to be the same thing. The technical distinctions aren't that important, in other words. So I can click where it says subtitles here in the menu. It will ask me usually, and it keeps asking me this over and over. I've never quite understood that. It's supposed to take it once and remember it. But you do have to set the language, the primary language, or the language in which the video is recorded. We of course want, and there are endless varieties of English, from vanilla English to Indian English, UK English. We'll take US English and confirm that. And we're provided with a way to access the captions that were created automatically by YouTube. That's this line right here where it says English Automatic. This second line is just the indication that this is an English video that we just gave YouTube. So I take this line where it says English Automatic, and I go out to the right, and I get this little vertical ellipsis, the 3 dots in a vertical row, which also indicates there's usually a menu underneath that. So I click on those dots to get that menu, and I can edit these captions. Classic Studio YouTube's in the process of converting between 2 tools that allow you as a video creator to access your videos and manage them. They call it YouTube Studio, as you see up here in the upper left. And they've mostly transitioned over to the new YouTube Studio, but there's still a few things that you can't do in the new interface The Classic Studio is the old interface, and they have to take you back there in order to edit your captions. That'll probably change at some point. Indeed, YouTube keeps changing, particularly its video creator interfaces all the time. So we have to keep remaking our YouTube tutorial videos and so on over and over. But at least they've given you an easy way to get back to the Classic Studio interface here to edit your captions. And a preview window for the video pops up. And we have the option to edit our captions right here. Edit these automatic captions. When I click that button, I see the captions here in a fairly straightforward display. Each caption is displayed in a separate box, and the time, the begin time and end time for each caption in the timeline of the video is shown. You don't usually have to worry about that. And the captions are now editable. To evaluate the accuracy of the captions, we can just play the video. Students can see their grades and get feedback thereupon in the Grades tool in the course menu. Okay, well, that was perfect. Nothing there. I might go in, and I should go in and capitalize my first letter, but I haven't even gotten to a punctuation mark yet, really. So I can go to the next caption. I can play there in the course menu in Canvas. Okay, clearly that was the end of a sentence from that pause, so I can put a period there. Individual gradable items, homework assignments. Cap there. And this sounds like a comma-separated list, so mainly what I'm doing is adding punctuation here and capital letters. But I can keep doing this. And if I do run on a word, I don't really see one here. It looks like it was perfect. But if I do find a word, I can highlight that word and retype it. A word that Canvas missed. Or that YouTube missed, excuse me. So the editing process is a little bit tedious, but not at all difficult. And for short videos, it's not even very tedious, not especially time consuming. Obviously, the longer the video, the longer it's going to take to edit the captions. And this can get to be prohibitive in terms of effort and time fairly quickly. It takes about 2 to 3 times the runtime of the video to edit the captions. So if it's a 5-minute video, it's probably going to take you 15 minutes to edit the captions, or longer, depending on your facility with the tool. So you just have to decide, well, are they, just edit the problems that are critical, where a critical word is misrecognized, like a technical term. You want to be sure to change that so that that will be intelligible. The captions will be intelligible to your students, to your hearing impaired students. But most of it, quite frankly, I just don't worry about. And when you get to things like Zoom recordings, where you record an entire Zoom class, which can run an hour or 2 or longer, editing captions becomes impossible, becomes prohibitive in terms of effort. So at that point, there's really not much you can do, which has always been sort of a conflict between functionality and accessibility in video. The video is too long. It's just it takes an unconscionable amount of time to edit the captions.
So Dave, I have a question.
Please. Boy,
So
I've been talking for a long time. Thank you.
I made a YouTube video, and there were closed captions there. I edited them carefully, but now I don't see anything where it says closed captions. I don't know if I forgot to save or what happened. And I looked all through it and can't find the closed captions, and I'm trying to submit it for my Canvas training.
Okay, in just a minute, I'm going to ask you to share your screen and show me that.
Okay.
See if we can figure out what happened. Thank you, because we're just about done here. Well, I've got the Immersive Reader yet to go, but I want to look at that. I want to see, is it in YouTube? Or
no,
on the
it's
Zoom?
not. I shared it, I saved it to the cloud, and it's not in YouTube.
Zoom cloud. Yeah, I
Cloud.
wanted to mention that in a minute too. That certainly should not happen. So we'll take a look. All right. So editing captions in YouTube is quite doable. When you're done, you do publish your edits to make sure that those changes are saved, and you're ready to go. So this works great with videos. What about audio files? Actually, you can trick YouTube into thinking an audio file is a video as well. You do have to have the only way I can think of to do it anyway, let's put it that way, is to, in effect, convert the audio into a sort of a video. And to do that, you have to have a video editor of some sort. So it's not something I want to try to illustrate to you right now, and it's a relatively uncommon occurrence. But if you have audio files in your Canvas courses that you don't have transcripts for, and if they're long enough that just transcribing them in the old-fashioned way by just listening, typing is really prohibitive in terms of effort, check with me, and I can go through a process and help you out with a process where I can provide you with I can convert that audio file into sort of a video file that can be uploaded to YouTube, and we can have YouTube create the transcript, and you can download that and then insert that into your Canvas page or wherever you're providing a link to that audio file. So if you have that issue, let me know and I can help you out. And the captioning features that we've just looked at in YouTube are also available in the Zoom cloud. And the captioning is almost as good as YouTube's, which is remarkable because YouTube basically invented this automatic captioning process. You can access your Zoom recordings, of course, under zoom.us and logging into your account. And you'll find your recordings under the Recordings tab here on the Zoom website. You can also see them. You can also access them through the Confer Zoom app in Canvas, though you get some more functionality here. So I'd recommend going in through the website. And these videos are in fact captioned. These are recordings of Zoom meetings, and they have been captioned. Bring up this video, show that. And up it goes. We're now recording. And welcome to today. There's closed caption tool. Today's seminar on grading in Canvas. Once your students take their assessments and their grades or their attempts start showing up at the grade book, how do you deal with them? How do you deal with the grade book? How do you get the grade book to compute your grades? And so on. All these things are things that the captions are there. But generally, the Zoom cloud does not perform nearly as well as YouTube. You're noticing the relatively poor playback here and so on. This is getting to be more and more of an issue with the Zoom cloud. as Zoom is just used so heavily. And Zoom is a tiny little company up outside of LA has grown massively in just the last month, and particularly in terms of usage, and their resources just haven't kept pace, where Google is like the second or third most valuable company, the second or third largest company in the world, at least by some measures, by market capitalization and things like that. They're huge by comparison. So Google has a lot more resources to throw at something like this than Zoom does. So I have my concerns about the Zoom cloud and its continuing viability, which is why I put my videos on YouTube. But you have the option either way. You can edit these by clicking the little edit link, the edit icon there. And that will also correct the captions. The interface is pretty good. I don't think quite as good as the edit interface in YouTube, but it's okay. But once you edit those and save, the captions certainly should still. So you're saying you just lost the closed caption icon there.
Well, I can't find it. Maybe I'm not looking in the right place.
Well, we're gonna see. All right. So anyway, so you get this same functionality in the Zoom cloud. It's a little different. In some ways, it's maybe better. In others, it's less well implemented, but it's still pretty good. It's certainly adequate, as long as the Zoom cloud holds up. If it doesn't, if your videos starts to get difficult to access your videos for your students. I'm sorry?
No, sorry. That was a mistake.
You can always download these videos from here by going to the More button opposite the video and selecting Download. It will download 4 files, the video and audio file, captions, the audio only, and something else. I can't remember right offhand what all 4 of them are, but it will download those files to your local hard drive. And then you can do whatever you can have. You have a backup of them. And if you start having problems with this, you can upload them to YouTube. And we have tutorials showing you how to do that sort of thing. Indeed, I've got a tutorial that shows specifically how to take your videos out of Zoom and upload them to YouTube. And those tutorials are available on our on-demand video tutorial website at sdccdolvid.org. Just search for Zoom recordings. Helps if you spell recordings right. Sorry. Mother told me to learn how to type. There we go, how to move your Zoom recordings from the Zoom cloud to YouTube. So we've got information on that. Even the folks at Tech Connect, Confer Zoom, recommend that if you put your videos up on the Zoom cloud, to download them and have them available in case you have to upload them somewhere else, because they're not too sure that this is going to last either, that the Zoom cloud is going to survive. Okay. There's one other thing I want to show you before we stop here. That's a new tool that has appeared in Canvas relatively recently. It's not a Canvas tool. It's actually something provided by our old frenemy Microsoft. I'm just looking for my, there it is, for my Canvas session here. Let me go ahead and save this document. And let me pull up a different page here. This also has to do with Canvas pages. Everything we've talked about, most of the accessibility things that you can affect in Canvas have to do with Canvas pages. So here's just a document that I pulled out of another Canvas course. When you bring up a page in Canvas, or when the students bring up a page in Canvas, one of the options that appears for you now is the Immersive Reader. And Microsoft's being very reasonable about this. They didn't even include their logo in that. But this is a tool created by Microsoft that is available for in other environments than Canvas. Indeed, you can use it with Microsoft Word, for instance. But it's especially valuable in Canvas, and Structure has integrated it with Canvas pages. This specifically only works in Canvas with Canvas pages. You can select the Immersive Reader, and it changes the display. This is a very limited, relatively primitive screen reader. So this is kind of something similar to an experience that a visually impaired student might have with a web page using a screen reader. The Immersive Reader alters the way in which the text of the document is displayed. It makes it bigger. It changes line length, reduces line length so that it's just easier for someone to read, particularly if they're visually impaired. So it's much easier to read the text. And it will also read it to you audibly. And this is very important for students with issues like dyslexia.
3.7 Netiquette Guidelines. Read. Module 3 Rainbow Header. Netiquette Guidelines. You will want to remind students that an
Terrific. You have control over things like text size. You can decide whether you want more spacing between words. That also helps people with reading difficulties. You can change the font that it displays in. Comic Sans is a font that's often derided as being childish. And I never knew the story behind this particular font, but it was developed to help young children learn to read. It makes reading easier for a lot of people. So just changing the font that the text is displayed in can make a big difference for people with reading difficulties. You can change color themes. You can go white on black, things like that. And that can help in many cases. You can also do things like highlight different parts of speech. Like if I want the verbs to show up, they can be highlighted in red. Well, that in itself is instructive for language students. And it can, again, make reading easier. Here we're violating that basic tenet, however, of using color to provide information and accessibility, but Microsoft thought about that, and they provided an option to show labels so that the verbs are identified not just, in this case, not just with color, but by the little V symbol above it. So you get around for somebody who's colorblind, that would be useful. But you can turn the reader can turn that on and off. So if you're not colorblind, you don't have to have that distraction. Under reading preference, you can do line focus, turn that on, and it will highlight the line that you're reading at a given time. All these things are proven to help students with reading difficulties. There's a picture dictionary included. But maybe the most remarkable thing to me about this is best illustrated in a different document. If I go to my page, view all my pages here, I am humbled to be one of those millions of Americans who is monolingual. And when presented with something like this, I can almost get by, at one point in my life, I could almost get by reading simple French and Latin, which is really useful now. But this is useless to me and to too many of us, shamefully. But in Immersive Reader, if I were trying to learn Spanish, this would be a huge help.
Spanish y document. Para su conveniencia, hemos traducido diferentes documentos al español.
For learning spoken Spanish, that's gold. So there'd be tremendous tool in language courses, quite apart from accessibility issues. But the real magic becomes when I select the language I want to translate this into and tell it to translate the entire document. This is a clear example or a clear instance of Clarke's first law, that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Not only is does it do the translation, but the translation in the cases I've tried has been excellent. It's getting close to the capabilities of human translation. Translation technology in general has become just so phenomenally better over the last 5 years or so that it is indistinguishable from magic. Either these people are magicians or they've sold their souls to Mephistopheles, and they're going to pay for it somewhere down the line. So just wanted to show you that this is, if you pull up the content of a web page that you really need or a document and so on, and you desperately want to get it translated. Of course, there are lots of Google Translate is always available now as a Google service, but you can just paste it into a Canvas page and translate it. And more importantly, your students who are not native speakers of English can translate your Canvas pages into their own languages. And you can see from the quality of this translation that they're going to get very usable translations of your documents if they need them. This is a tremendous added value for students who are having to live and operate and learn in a language other than their own, which applies to so many of our students at the district. So this is a big deal for me. And it also is an issue of overall accessibility, because not that variations in languages are disabilities, but that they can be limitations to learning. And this Immersive Reader that we now have available for all of our Canvas pages helps to alleviate that. Yeah, I see in the first time you see this, it just kind of blows your socks off. So a great tool. And that pretty much concludes what I wanted to talk about today. formally, or such as formal as it ever gets with me. So let's take a look at the questions in the let's take a look at the questions in the chat tool first on this specific issue or this specific topic. Let's see. Fred, you said that your version of Office doesn't have this. What version of Office are you using? I think we were referring there to the accessibility checker. Sorry.
Yes, I think it's a educational, like an ed edition that I got a few years ago with this computer. I think
the fact that it's an educational edition shouldn't be a factor, but age could be.
Yeah,
I'm not sure when I put that in.
I think it might be 2012.
Yeah. So you don't, do you even have a review option on in the application menu at the top?
Yes, I have the review option. It just doesn't have the
accessibility checker in it.
Right.
Yeah. Probably the only thing you can do there is upgrade, and there are some great deals available through the district to upgrade to the current version of Office 365. As a matter of fact, with an EDU email address, you can get it absolutely free, though it has some limitations, of which this is not one. So it might be worth a try. Just Google free Microsoft Office for educators, and it'll come up.
I think it'd give a 365 version, which we'd have to update every year. Is that correct?
No, that actually updates are great there. That like Canvas is a cloud resource, so it's updated all the time, and you don't have to worry about it. And you might have to re-up for the free version periodically to re-verify that you're still employed at an educational institution. But you should not. I've got this Office that I'm using, Office 2016, through that same program, and I'm still using it even though I've been retired for 3 years, because I still have access to my EDU email address at the district because I'm still doing consulting. But I would assume that I will retain access to this even after I stop doing that, so, and lose access to my EDU email address.
Yeah,
so
I was concerned about
you should be able to get an up-to-date version of Office for either free or just, I think it's $30 or $40, something like that, if you pay for it. The free version has limitations, like you can't, I don't think you can save documents to your local hard drive and things like that. You have to save it to OneDrive, the Microsoft Cloud document repository, things like that. So they're trying to get you to buy it, but through the district, you can get a very, very much reduced price on it. If you'd send me an email, I'll try to get you some more concrete information on that.
Okay.
No need, in other words, to suffer along with an outdated version of Office. I don't think.
Yeah, I was concerned about trying to install it and having it mess up my current system.
Well, Office 365 is primarily cloud-based. You mainly use it through a browser, or a dedicated browser, so it's not likely to really. And multiple versions of Microsoft Office will coexist on the same computer. I've got an older computer in there that has access to this, but also has access to Office 2007, and they live alongside one another just fine. Okay. Because I still have the install media for Office 2007. Here's a good question, Fred, also of yours. Does YouTube learn our voices? I don't believe so. So I don't think it gets better over time. The more videos you caption, the better it learns your voice. I've never been able to find any indication, and I've asked that question myself, But the upside of that is that it's so good cold without having learned your voice that it still does a great job, which means if you have a video that has multiple voices on it or voices that are not yours and maybe multiples, it still does a great job capturing the video. There may be buried down in the algorithm somewhere, they may actually be identifying your voice and maybe improving the captions over time. But even with a brand new YouTube account and so on, the captions are amazing. They've gotten speech recognition technology so dialed in over the years. A lot of that research, a lot of the progress there was actually made in Asian countries, in Japan and China, places like that, where the written language is so complex that speech recognition was a high priority for them all along. A lot of this research that Google has tapped into here came out of those countries. They were working on that back when Captain James Kirk was speaking to his computer on the Starship Enterprise on TV in first run. They were starting to work on voice recognition technology or speech recognition technology.
Dave, can you help me with my closed caption problem?
Yeah, we're almost to the bottom of this because I've got a wonderful comment here from somebody who is a language instructor. Elia, you say you find many times the translations need work because there are false cognates and cultural variations. They're not easy to translate. I'd love to hear if you look at this Immersive Reader and try some different translations in it. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that. Okay. Very good. All righty. I tell you what I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and take a look at that caption issue. I am going to kill my share so that you can share your screen, and we'll take a look at that. The share button's in the center of the menu at the bottom of the screen now. See if we can figure out what's going on here. All right, this is a okay, the video, can you get that out of full screen mode if you would? Probably just press escape. I'm trying to, because this interface is not looking familiar to me. This doesn't look like the Zoom Cloud interface that I'm familiar with. Should be able to unfull screen that window. Over on the left, this is a Mac, isn't it? Yeah. In the upper left corner there, you can. Nicola, I'm going to request remote control from you, and I'll see if I can get this, what I can do with this, if you're amenable. You can just click OK on that. Okay, let me see here. I want to see how you got to this. Oh, that's me. Yeah, this is my recording up here I'm dealing with. Let's see here. Let's see here. Let me exit full screen. Okay. Try this. Oh, that's me again. And this is the Zoom cloud, Nicola? You're muted right now. You can just press the space bar to talk if you like. There's you, okay. Trying different things on my screen here, excuse me. Huh, so I'm just not recognizing that at all. And I'm not hearing from you. I'm wondering if we're having bandwidth issues there. I'm gonna give up remote control so you have control your own screen again. And let me, I'm going to go ahead and share. Oh, there, now I'm starting to see you moving about. I think we're having bandwidth issues here. Let me, it may be on my end. Let me share my screen and kill that share. So let me see, Nicola, have you been?
All right, I'm back.
There.
So I'm
I heard you there for a second. Are you hearing me okay?
I hear you, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, now you're coming through. That was the Zoom cloud?
That was a Zoom cloud recording, and there were captions there because I edited them all. It took me forever, but they don't show up on that little video. Did you see the video? Could you see it?
No, I did not see the video. All I saw was the player interface, and I couldn't see I couldn't evaluate the presence or absence of captions. Let me show you again what I see when I go here. I go into one of these recordings. I just click on the icon for the recording there. I see this, something that looks like this. And up it goes. We're now recording.
Okay. Well, let me try that on mine because I have something like that. So I'm in my recordings page now in my Zoom. And so I just click on the name of my thing.
Right.
Which is, okay, and then I get that same thing. So I just click on the image, the little black box.
Right, the little black box with the player button in it.
Okay, that looks just like, okay, that looks like yours, but there's, I don't know if there's anything on.
Then you'll have to click on the welcome to today's seminar to see the closed caption
Okay, so yeah, I see it now, but I'm not sure.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
maybe yeah, okay, that's it. That's what I want. Now that's, and then, oh yeah, and all the closed captions are there. So now how would somehow I saved something else instead of this.
I don't know, but you saw you can edit the captions, and you've already done that by just going over here to the transcript and clicking on the little.
So I just go to copy shareable link, and that's what I want. If I want to put it, say, on my Canvas or something like that. For the
Right,
student.
you need the link, and to do that, you go back to the video list.
I see that. I see copy shareable link. Okay, so somehow I just got something else. I understand now. Okay.
Good. That's what we're after. As long as you can get that and you can share it with your students.
Yeah.
One limitation you have in sharing this with your students is that you can't embed it into a Canvas page like you can with a YouTube video, unless you know how to write HTML code. you have to create your own embed code, which I don't recommend. So this just gives you the link. And if you put this into Canvas, or when you put this into Canvas, be careful. If you make it the most common way to do that is just make it a link in a module. And if you add it as an external link in the module, be sure if it's a link to a video stored on the Zoom cloud, be sure to select load in a new tab. Otherwise, it won't play. I found that out the hard way.
Okay.
That's the only caveat I'd say there. But it'll play just fine.
I can't just copy the link right into a page?
No. Well, yeah, you could do that. You could do that as well. You can't embed it, but you can just put it in a page. That's very true.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Video page. Let me just make one here. So let me go back and get one of my links here. Copy shareable link. There we go. I got it. There's the link. That will not, just hit enter, and then that will become a hyperlink that the student can just click on and access the video.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah.
You bet. You bet. Okay. See. I have some about adding audio description. Ooh. Lisa, I don't know if you're still here or not. Let me check. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you notice my avoiding the issue of audio descriptions for videos in this. That is also a requirement for accessibility under Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of ADA. And it's something we've just tiptoed around for many years, because audio descriptions are exceptionally difficult to do. They require tools that are not widely available. They require an immense amount of time and a great deal of skill to create and make them effective. So the general strategy is to mostly ignore them. There are, from time to time, there have been tools that have popped up that are purported to make it possible to do that, or effectively and more easily. I've not seen anything that actually has met those standards yet. Though I haven't looked in the last 6 months, I probably should go back and look at that issue again. I will tell you what we've generally been telling video creators from the get-go about this issue. And that is that when you are making a video of your own and you are talking about something that is on your computer screen that you're sharing with your students, try to make your narration as rich as possible, as descriptive as possible of what they're seeing on the screen. So if I were talking about using this interface here, instead of saying, well, you just play this video by clicking on the play button and pointing at it and clicking, I would say, I would try to say something like, to play this video, there's a play button in the very lower left-hand corner of the video window. It's shaped like a rightward pointing triangle. And if you put your mouse on that and click, it will play the video. So you try to be as, and this is something they told us to do in classrooms when I was just getting started as a teacher back in the latter half of the 20th century. And they always encouraged you when you were lecturing to make your lecture as visually descriptive of your speech, as visually descriptive as possible, because you might have a visually impaired student sitting in your physical classroom. And to try to develop those habits is about the best thing you can really do vis-a-vis video descriptions right now. But if you send me an email on that and reminding me, I'll go in and look and see if there's been any major progress in that area as far as self-produced videos by instructors has gone. You can get videos described where basically there's an extra soundtrack in there and the descriptions are shoehorned in between the dialogue that's already in the video, and it talks about what's on the screen, sort of like an audio version of that alt text that I put in for that graph. And like I say, it's fiendishly difficult to do effectively. And the tools are very cumbersome, very expensive. It's something you almost have to have done professionally by somebody who does it all the time. But maybe better alternatives have arisen. I'll go back and look. I'll go and take another look at that. I was wondering if that would come up today. Lisa, you win the whatever prize there is for that. Oh, okay, we got some more questions here in the chat tool. I promise I'll answer all those before I go. There's still a few of us here. From Jorge, I just noticed that Zoom is attaching passwords to Zoom meetings. Yeah, they are, all of a sudden. That happened to me. They did it to one of mine a week ago today. And people couldn't get into my meeting on Friday morning because the day before there hadn't been a password there. I didn't catch it that morning. I didn't have any reason to look at it. I'd verified everything was working fine the day before. Really wish they wouldn't change things without telling us. They did sort of make a blanket announcement about security enhancements and so on, but they didn't say, well, we're adding passwords to all your meetings. They said that. They said it would only happen to free Zoom accounts and Zoom accounts that were not part of an overall account structure like our Confer Zoom accounts, but then they did it there anyway.
Yeah, I just find out right now. I got a class this afternoon, and I was checking myself, and I noticed there was a password on it. So I'm trying.
Do you want to see how to get rid of it?
Can I?
Yes.
Okay. The thing is, my internet is so messed up. I couldn't even. I'm having another problem with that. internet. It's just driving me crazy today.
Yeah,
Can you email me the procedures or?
yes. Will you email me? Remind me. I'll email it back to you.
Okay.
I empathize with the internet problems. I've had some this morning myself.
Yeah.
I'll send you a little tutorial that'll show you how to remove those passwords.
Okay, that would be great because right now I'm waiting the AT&T guy trying to see if he can fix my internet, and it's going on and off. That's why.
Good luck. Yeah, your sound coming through is a little garbled, but I'm getting the sense of what you're saying. Sorry about that.
All right, Dave. Thank you. I appreciate it. So
Great. Good to see you, Jorge.
Huh?
Good to see you today.
Okay. Okay. I have an email on the bottom. My email.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You describe, yeah. Lisa, I got that. That's the tool I'd seen before. Okay, very good. I'll take another look at that. Thank you, Nicola, very much for that. Trust me, I learn something every time I do one of these. So it's great for me too. And the questions are the best part, as always. So thank you so much for all of that. It looks like we are just about done here. Looks like I'm the only one left. So I'm going to go ahead and kill this and get out. Yep, just me.